The girl never asked for a mansion, just a doghouse. Soaked by a storm, clutching her backpack like it carried her whole life, she pressed the gate intercom and begged for a night out of the rain. Inside, billionaire Damien Clarke had a glass of Burgundy in hand, debating millions. What came next wasn't in any business plan, a gate swinging open, a choice that would ignite whispers across his gated community, and a mystery girl whose single request would unravel more than one carefully guarded life. Would mercy cost him everything, or give him more? The rain started just after sunset, one of those sudden city downpours that turned sidewalks into mirrors and made rich houses look like ships lit from within. At the end of a long curving drive in the Heights, a girl in a thin jacket stood at a wrought iron gate and pressed the intercom button. She jittered from the cold, water running from her hair into her collar, and when the camera light winked on, she leaned close, as if proximity might translate into mercy. "I'm not asking to come inside," she said to the unseen voice that crackled back at her. "Please, just the doghouse. One night. I won't touch anything." The camera's red dot blinked. Somewhere beyond the hedges a dog barked once, deep and polite. The girl's fingers tightened around the strap of her backpack. "Please, I just need to sleep somewhere that isn't the bus stop." Inside the house, a man paused mid-conversation. Damien Clarke, who had spent most of his life learning how to make the world bend to him, tilted his head, listening. He had been debating the merits of a late-stage investment with two partners over a decanted Burgundy, the kind of conversation that usually absorbed him down to the atoms. Tonight the buzzer cut through the room like a second heartbeat. "Ben?" he called. The security chief's voice came through a concealed speaker. "Young woman at the gate, sir. Says she wants the doghouse for the night." Damien's left eyebrow lifted a fraction, a movement so small that only people paid to notice him would notice it. He glanced toward the glass doors that opened to the garden. Even from here he could see the doghouse. Cedar, hand-built, big enough for a Great Dane because that's exactly what Atlas was. The housekeeper, Teresa, stood at the threshold with a folded napkin, her face turned toward the rain. "Sir?" she asked, and the one syllable held 19 years of working in other people's weather. "Let me see the feed," Damien said. The living room's wall display blinked from art to grayscale footage. The girl's face filled a corner. Too young to have given up on anything, too tired to pretend she hadn't. She wore no makeup, or if she had, it had surrendered to the rain an hour ago. Her eyes were dark and steady in that particular way of people who have already run out of softer choices. Damien set down his glass. Time was his currency. He spent it like a miser. He stood anyway. Ben's voice again, this time lower. "We can call a shelter, Mr. Clarke, or I can send her along." "Ask her name," Damien said. The intercom crackled. "Miss, your name?" "June," the girl answered. "June Reyes." Damien said, "Tell her I'll be there in a minute." Teresa blinked. "You'll be where?" "The gate." "Sir, you don't—" "It's raining," he said, already walking. On the drive he moved with the same controlled focus that had built companies and unraveled competitors. Atlas padded beside him, leash slack, ears pricked. The Great Dane's coat shone like wet slate under the walkway lights, his massive head swinging with interest toward the gate where a figure waited shivering. As Damien approached, the guard booth light illuminated his face. June flinched like she expected a rebuke. She probably did. Men like him, men behind gates, usually said no with their eyes first. "June," he said through the ironwork, simple as a greeting in a grocery store. "How old are you?" 23, she said, chin up but not defiant. I don't want to cause trouble. I just need to be out of the rain. The doghouse is big. I'll clean up after myself. I can pay to... Well, I can clean something." He watched the rain bead on her eyelashes and try to drag her downward. "No," he said. It came out gentle, but it was still no. She flinched again, but this time it was more like bracing for a second impact after the car has already spun. She nodded, as if she'd known what the answer would be since the day had started, and reached up to wipe the water from her mouth with the back of her hand. "Okay," she said. "Okay." She reached for her backpack strap like she could pull herself out of the moment with it. "No," Damien repeated, clearer. "Because you're not sleeping in a doghouse on my property." Atlas huffed. June's mouth opened, then closed. It was possible to watch hope remember itself. He could see it happen like a pilot light catching wind. She looked at the doghouse and then back at him. "I wasn't asking to come inside," she said softly, the words careful and thin. "I know what you were asking," he said. He glanced at Ben, who stood half out of the booth, unsure whether to offer an umbrella or call the police. "Open the gate." "Mr. Clarke," Ben said, an entire cautionary policy manual crammed into 2 syllables. "Open it," Damien said, and something in his voice reminded everyone present that he'd negotiated down harder walls than this, in places where rain was a trick of the air conditioning. The gate swung. June didn't step forward immediately. She did something else instead. She looked at the dog. Atlas regarded her with polite curiosity, then took one enormous step forward and pressed his head just once to the bars at her hand height. June smiled like the movement had been a benediction. Then she stepped in. "Teresa," Damien called as they walked. "Hot soup, spare blankets, something dry she can change into." "Of course," Teresa said, and there was a small tremor in the last word that was less about fear and more about old memory. A winter in a different job. A night her mother had slept in a car with 2 children because there had been no other place to go. They crossed the stone walk. The water had stopped being dramatic and settled into the kind of persistent rain that wore away everything given enough hours. In the doorway, June hesitated. It wasn't grand, not by certain standards. Damien's house had been designed to suggest quiet money rather than shouting. But compared to a bus stop, it might as well have been Versailles. She slipped off her shoes without being asked. Her socks made a wet sigh on the entry tile. Atlas shook himself and sent a constellation of droplets across the hall. June laughed, a too quick sound, like she'd hit a musical note without meaning to. "In here," Teresa said kindly, guiding her toward a small den by the kitchen with a big corduroy couch. "You sit. I'll get you towels." June did not sit. She stood on the edge of the rug like it might bite. "Thank you," she said to everyone and no one, the way you speak to the ocean if you make it to shore. "I can work. I'm good at cleaning, at organizing." "What do you need most?" Damien asked. The question seemed to surprise her more than the room had. People like him didn't ask what people like her needed. They had standard-issue answers, pre-packaged and philanthropic. June's gaze went to her backpack on the floor and then away from it. "A night," she said, and when her eyes lifted to his, he saw the effort it cost to keep her tone even. "Just a night where nothing can get to me." "You have it," he said. Teresa pressed a towel into June's hands and one around her shoulders. Ben stood at the threshold like a human boundary. Damien nodded for him to go, and he melted back into the hall with the silent efficiency of someone paid to be invisible when he wasn't needed. June dried her face and pushed her wet hair behind her ears. Any makeup she'd started the day with had long dissolved, but she had the kind of bones that made an argument for architecture. Strong, fine, honest. "I'm sorry to bother you," she said. "I tried other places." "What happened?" Damien asked. She looked at the towel, folded its edge, unfolded it. "There's a shelter on Ward Street," she said finally. "But there was a man outside yelling and throwing bottles, and the woman at the desk said I could come back in the morning to put my name on a list. A friend texted me that the buses stopped running early tonight because of the storm, and She touched the strap of the backpack with 2 fingers. "I have my mother's papers in here, birth certificate, some photos, the last of everything. I couldn't sleep on the bus. People take things when you sleep." Damien glanced at Teresa, who was already setting a bowl of soup on the low table. The steam fogged June's view of the room briefly, turning the lamp into a halo. "Eat," Teresa said. June took a spoon. She ate like someone who remembered what manners were even now. After 3 mouthfuls, she stopped to breathe, and her hands finally shook just once. She steadied them on the bowl. "Thank you," she said, Atlas nosed her knee. She smiled without looking away from the soup. "I can share," she told him seriously. "But you're a very large gentleman, and I think you've already had dinner." Damien leaned on the door frame. "Where are you living now, June?" "Now?" She thought for a second. "Now is here, I guess." She added quickly, "Just for tonight. Tomorrow I'll make the list. I'll figure it out." He knew that voice. He'd used a version of it when he was 21 and telling his mother he had a job offer out of state, as if geography could save souls. Back then, before the press photos and the tailored suits, he'd spent 2 sticky summers sleeping in an old pickup behind a warehouse while he tried to make a piece of software sit up and behave. He had Atlas now. Back then it had been a mutt named Radio, who decided to love him no matter how foolish he was. The dog had slept on his chest to stop the anxiety shivers. The memory came back like a smell you haven't thought of in years, and he felt his carefully arranged life tilt a degree. "You can stay in the pool house tonight," he said. "It's warm. There's a lock on the door, only you have the key to, and Atlas will sleep on the porch." June's spoon stopped halfway to her mouth. "I can't. This room is fine." Her eyes jumped to the couch as if she'd forgotten the luxury of horizontal space. "The pool house," he repeated. "In the morning we can talk about what's next, if you want." Teresa's face softened with relief. "I'll get it ready," she said, already moving. June put the spoon down, hands flat on her knees. She looked like someone who had spent an entire day not trusting any good thing that tried to touch her, because good things usually came with hooks. "Why?" she asked. The question was honest, not accusatory. He liked her more for it. Damien took a beat, as he did with board questions that carried actual weight. "Because I can," he said, "and because the last time I slept outside in the rain, I promised myself that if I ever owned a roof, I'd learn how to share it." June's mouth flickered, a smile trying to decide if it was allowed. "That's not what people think when they see a gate." "Gates are for keeping the wrong things out," he said. "Sometimes we get confused about what those are." After she had eaten and changed into dry sweats, Teresa somehow conjured from the linen closet, after Atlas had made a ceremonial inspection of the pool house and situated himself like a lion statue on the porch. After Ben had done 2 careful laps of the property and radioed in that all was quiet, Damien went back to the living room. The Burgundy sat where he'd left it. The investment partners had left 2 polite notes. He didn't pick up the glass. He stood by the window and watched the rain flatten the dark pool into a sheet of hammered metal. Across the way a warm square of light shone behind drawn curtains where the pool house stood. The housekeeper drifted in at the edge of his awareness. "Sir," Teresa said softly, "there will be calls." "From who?" "The neighbors, the board president." She hesitated. "Mrs. Lyle gets concerned." Mrs. Lyle did not like surprises unless she'd planned them. He nodded once. "Tell her we're doing emergency maintenance on the pool heater. It might take a few nights." Teresa's mouth twitched. "Of course." He slept badly and woke early. At 6:30, coffee in hand, he walked across the flagstones to the pool house and knocked lightly. June opened the door at once. She'd slept fully dressed, the way you did when the idea of ease frightened you. Even so, he could see the 30% of rest a locked door gives you. It was the difference between survival and living. "How'd you sleep?" he asked. "Like a person," she said, and then looked embarrassed at her own answer. "We'll go over to Ward Street," he said. "Put you on the list. Then we'll get breakfast." She shook her head. "I have to look for work." "What kind?" "Any kind." He believed her. The girl had the eyes of someone who would mop a cathedral and then apologize for the water stains. "Do you have a resume?" She exhaled a small laugh. "I did. The last manager I had said if I wanted it, I could go back and get it from the dumpster out back." "What manager?" "At the diner on 10th, she said. "I got fired because a customer claimed I stole his watch. I didn't. It turned up in his gym bag a week later, but by then they'd already replaced me with the manager's nephew with the neck tattoo." She paused, weighing how much of herself she owed this morning. "It doesn't matter." It mattered. Damien sipped his coffee and kept his face easy. "We'll get a new resume written," he said, "but first breakfast." Can you leave your bag here?" June's hand went to the strap like a reflex. "I'm sorry, No." "You can bring it," he said immediately, and relief softened her shoulders. "Come on. Atlas gets a scone." The cafe 3 streets over was the kind with glossy pastries arranged like patents, and a set of regulars who enjoyed the performance of being first. When Damien walked in with a girl in borrowed sweats and a wet backpack, heads turned because that is what heads do when a story walks through the door wearing a human face. People had learned to read status so quickly it was practically fluent. June kept her eyes on the menu board as if she could hide inside the word croissant. They took a corner table. Atlas rested his chin on Damien's knee and sighed. June watched, half amused. "He's dramatic." "Truly," Damien said, "the fainting couch was his idea." "Is he always good?" "Only when it matters." He pushed a plate toward her. "Eat again." While she ate, he drafted an email to his operations director and his legal counsel. The subject line was a single word: pilot. The body outlined an idea that had sat on his whiteboard for 3 months: convert a vacant boutique hotel his company owned into interim housing with staffing and job training, funded by an endowment that took its first dollars from his motor collection. He had recorded the cars for the pleasure of the recording, the proof that the boy in the pickup had made it, and then left them in a climate-controlled memory. It was time to turn them into something else. He signed the email and pressed send before he could start doing math about what it would cost him in charm at cocktail parties. "Thank you," June said, her voice low. She was not thanking him for the pastry. He could hear that. She was thanking him for the way he had not made the room smaller, for the way he had looked at her like she belonged inside the conversation already underway. "You're welcome," he said simply. He dropped her at Ward Street with a promise to meet her in an hour. As he drove away, he watched in the rear-view mirror as she squared her shoulders and stepped forward toward the clipboard, toward names scrawled in rain-smeared ink, toward being counted again. The first call came while he was still in the car. "Damien," Mrs. Lyle said, her tone the sound of money arranging its pearls, "I heard you had guests." "I did," he said, briefly. "This is a private community. I noticed." "It's a matter of safety," she said, and he pictured her manicure, the way she tapped it against glass when impatient. "There are procedures." "There are also storms," he said, "and human beings inside them." A silence like a held breath. "I'm sure you're handling it appropriately," she said at last, which in her language meant this conversation would be replayed later in front of people with clipboards. The second call was his PR director, whose voice slid between him and fires for a living. "We got an inquiry," she said lightly. "A neighbor saw someone come through your gate and thought she recognized a former diner employee who had an issue with a customer's missing watch." "Already?" he said. "It's a small city if you have the right magnifying glass." She paused, and the pause asked a question with teeth. "Is she okay?" "She's getting on a list," he said. "This is not a story." "It will be," the director said. "Everything you do is. Do you want it to be yours or theirs?" He looked down at the message he'd sent 10 minutes ago. "Mine," he said. By noon there was a photograph on a gossip account. Damien Clarke in a raincoat at his own gate, Atlas's head visible behind his leg, and a girl in profile with a backpack strap across her chest. The caption used the word mystery. The comments used all kinds of others. He turned off his phone and went to pick up June. Ward Street made humility a smell. In the intake room, June held a paper cup of coffee and a number printed in dull ink. She looked at him with relief exactly once before schooling her face back into privacy. "They said a few days," she said, "which could mean tomorrow or never. It's okay. I figured it would be something like that." "You're coming back with me," he said. "You can stay in the pool house for the week. We'll pay you for helping Teresa." June's jaw worked. "I don't want charity." "Good," he said. "This isn't that. It's a job. Teresa needs help with inventory before the end of quarter audit, and you said you're good at organizing. I have it on excellent authority that the pantry is a disgrace. Teresa would kill him for that later, but rules bent toward the right shape if you warmed them first. June studied his face like she was trying to find the clause written in smallest font. "A week," she said at last, "and if I'm not helpful, you tell me." "Deal." At the house, Teresa put June to work labeling shelves with a pen and a roll of tape, and within 2 hours the housekeeper came into Damien's study with the pleased scowl she wore when she wanted to pretend she wasn't pleased at all. "She moves like she's done this in 5 different kitchens," Teresa said. "She doesn't guess where things go. She listens for it. You know what I mean." He knew exactly what she meant. The best hires in his companies had always been the ones who listened to the shape of a problem before touching it. His phone said 3 missed calls. He ignored all of them and watched through the half-open door as June ran her finger along the spines of spice jars, arranging the language of thyme and cumin, returning to their own order under her hands. That night dinner was simple: roasted chicken, potatoes, salad. And June ate slowly, carefully, the way people who had been shamed for hunger learned to perform not hungry. Damien and Teresa ignored the performance until it wore itself out. After, June stood and began to clear plates without being asked. "Leave them," Teresa said. "You worked enough." "I like to leave places better than I found them," June said, "even if I'm only in them for a little while." He felt it again, that tilt inside his chest. He knew how to measure most things. He had spreadsheets for patience, evaluations for risk. He did not have a grid for the exact weight of a stranger's sentence. Word spread faster than he could decide the shape of the story. The next morning, a slim woman in ballet flats rang his bell. She introduced herself as Candace and said she ran the book club down the hill. She had heard he was harboring a person best assisted elsewhere. He said he wasn't harboring anyone. He was employing someone. Candace's eyebrows went up like tiny sails. "Just be careful," she advised, and left a flyer for a neighborhood meeting beneath a monogrammed paperweight, as if to say gravity belonged to her. 2 hours later, the flyer appeared on the community app. Agenda Item 3, Security Protocols in Inclement Weather. "Do you need me to go?" June asked in the pantry, eyes on the stack of glass containers she was lining up by size. She asked the question like people talk to bombs, very calmly. "No," Damien said. "You need to finish alphabetizing the apocalypse." She smiled without turning. "The apocalypse belongs between apple cider vinegar and arboreal rice, obviously." He laughed out loud, and the sound startled both of them with how much the house immediately liked it. The meeting was held in a clubhouse soaked in tasteful beige. Damien sat at the end of a long table, while people he'd known for 5 years made reasonable noises about precedent and policing. Mrs. Lyle oversaw the proceedings with the serene certainty of a person who had never been evicted by anything but boredom. When it was his turn, Damien stood without notes. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "I grew up in a walk-up with a mom who paid cash for rent because checks bounced faster than jobs," he said. "I slept in a truck for part of 2 summers while I built the thing that paid for the gate you're concerned about. If you'd seen my face on a camera in the rain at 23 and said, 'Not our problem,' I might not be your neighbor. I'm not asking you to move people into your homes. I'm not even asking you to change your minds. I'm saying I won't apologize for opening my gate on a stormy night." He paused. "And for the record, I'm making a more permanent change. I'm converting a building my company owns into a pilot program for interim housing with training. If anyone wants to help, my door is open. If you want to send me angry emails about how property values react to compassion, that door is open too. I can read in both languages." It was not a speech calculated to make him more beloved. It was, however, designed to make the point stick. He sat. Candace stared at him like he had spoken in French at a Midwestern potluck. Mrs. Lyle remained unruffled, which meant he had ruffled her in 5 places already. When he got home, June was on the kitchen step with Atlas's head in her lap. The dog had developed an instant theology around June that posited she deserved guarding whether she liked it or not. "How'd it go?" she asked. He shrugged. "Half the room thinks I'm naive. The other half thinks I'm staging a PR stunt." "What do you think?" June asked. "I think a stunt would have drier shoes." He sat beside her, lets his back find the door. "My company lawyer called while I was out. He wants to make sure whatever we do with the hotel doesn't expose us to 18 kinds of liability." "I don't know anything about liability," June said. "I only know that when you asked me last night what I needed most, I didn't say food even though I was hungry. I didn't say money, even though that would have solved a lot. I said a night. That's the thing I haven't had in a long time. A night that doesn't hurt. If your building can give that to other people, big doors or little ones, they'll find their way into the rest." He looked at her and saw the part of his younger self that had refused to quit if the code didn't compile by dawn. He saw something else, too. The way her spine carried dignity, like a candle, that wouldn't go out even when the windows were all cracked. "What was your mother like?" he asked, because it had been sitting between them all day, like a chair no one wanted to move. June considered. "Keen," she said. "She could tell when the bus was going to come before you saw it. She knew when rain would help and when it would ruin what you hung on the line. She could stretch $1 into 3 meals and a treat if she wanted to prove a point." She got sick, the bad kind, the kind that eats time. "When she died, I stayed in our apartment until the landlord changed the lock while I was at work because my name wasn't on the lease. I thought if I kept paying, they'd let me stay. It doesn't work like that." She breathed in, breathed out, made the breathing its own kind of war. "I spent a few months on a friend's couch. Then she had to move back to Texas. Things get stringy like that. You pull one piece and the rest comes with it." He had more money than he could spend responsibly in 3 lifetimes. He also had a finite number of the one thing he valued more now than he had at 21. Hours he could put his hands on a wheel and turn it for someone else too. "We can make you a better map," he said, "if you're willing." "I don't want to be anyone's project," she said without edge. "You won't be," he said. "I don't do projects when people are involved. I do partnerships." They started with the small things that are never small. A new ID card because hers had been stolen, and you have to prove you exist before anyone will let you sign anything. A checking account with a balance that belonged to her. A phone plan that didn't depend on the kindness of Wi-Fi. He paid her for work Teresa would have done slower without her, and he didn't call it an advance because words make rooms different sizes. On the 3rd day, PR called again. "You're trending," his director said like she was reporting a mild fever. "The Doghouse line is the headline." "What line?" "She asked to sleep in a doghouse. You said no, and now we're here," the director said dryly. "Someone at the meeting recorded your comment about gate confusion. Also, you should know, someone found the diner manager on social, and he posted that she was fired for cause. He's getting mean about it." Damien hung up and called legal. "Find out who owns the diner," he said. "I want to talk to whoever is in charge, and I want it to be a conversation they take seriously." By dinner time, he had the owner on the line, a tired man who sounded like he measured his life in broken change. "I can't rehire everyone who quits," the man said. "What do you want me to say?" "I want you to look at the camera footage from the night she was accused, and I want you to see how quickly your floor manager acted without evidence. I want you to consider that he stole the resume she left on his desk, because I've noticed she has one less document than she should. I want you to tell him to take down his post." The man exhaled, unhappy but not cruel. "I'll look," he said. "I got daughters. I know how boys get when they think they're kings of the fryer." The post came down. June did not ask for an apology. She sat with Atlas and learned how to teach him a new trick, because sometimes grace is learned in a language that has nothing to do with men on the internet. The hotel conversion went from idea to blueprint to demolition in 2 weeks. Money has a way of convincing paperwork to walk faster. So does pressure applied by someone unmoved by the kind of threat that mentions donor lists. A team came through the building like a tide, pulling out carpet, widening doorways, installing locks with codes that could be changed one person at a time. The press called the project Keys, Not Cots. He let them. Headlines are the pies cooling on the windowsill of public opinion. Sometimes you take one so you can get people to try the meal. The neighbors were quieter after the ribbon cutting. You can argue with a story. You have to bow to a building. June kept working. She added systems to Teresa's kingdom the way salt wakes vegetables. She took the bus to the hotel and helped set up the clothing room with sizes that made sense, tags that didn't shame. She discovered she was very good at telling people things in a way they could hear. When the first residents moved into their rooms, she handed a small boy a dinosaur blanket and watched his mother watch him make a fort out of a bed without fear for the first time in months. That night she cried in the pool house with the lights off and the door locked and Atlas pressed against her shin, and when Damien found her in the morning, she looked lighter instead of less.